Welcome to Watch the Bookerman and to what I'm going to consider perhaps the most important episode of the series thus far. We are 8 weeks away from WCW Starrcade 2001, the return to pay-per-view for WCW, the first since the Big Bang in May. And to steal language from another company, this is the road to Starrcade. And the stories that you can see on screen there are going to play a big part into what I'm going to do in this episode. It's time to stop trying to kick things down the road and just do them when they need to be done. I don't want to risk another big company even getting these guys on tour that will delay the time that I can get them, so I really need to act fast because these are the two biggest people who have become available in the course of this save, and they will probably slot in as the number 3 and 4 guys at worst under Shane and Booker T, so really essential that we get those deals done. I am just going to have a quick look through the roster as we do every couple of months. Booker T and Shane still our only major stars. I'm hoping that we do Diamond Dallas Page in the star category and Jerry the King Lawler, where you can't argue that he has been booked well, 2 victories, 0 defeats, and he's beaten both of those Extreme Outsiders, a storyline we're of course going to follow up in this week's episode of WCW Nitro. Now, those signings that we've brought in, adding to our already pretty sizable, well-known category, but these are the guys who I wanted to see up there, particularly Chuck Palumbo and Sean O'Hare after that huge victory for them. I do want to see if their popularity has grown a little bit, but nothing massive. But if you'd probably talk about how I've booked people, Buff Bagwell up there as well, I'd say it's pretty fair. Billy Kidman up there, despite his really poor performances, just a solid group of, that's our upper mid card, isn't it? It's fair. But now available to make their debuts this week on Nitro, along with potentially some other big names. We don't want to overshadow them, of course, but Andrew Martin and Christian Cage, both available to work, as is another signing who I'm hoping will be on this recognisable list. Thankfully he is, so Jerry Lynn will be making his debut also pretty soon. From where we started at the beginning of the save, there are now a lot more names than were there previously, so very happy with that. I don't think there's been a considerable change, if we're perfectly honest, but the likes of Tajiri, as I mentioned in the last episode, now being on that recognisable list is good to see, and I'm hoping that some of these guys who, yeah, let's be fair, AJ Styles probably is some way away, but he's made incredible progress in the few weeks or months that he's been in the company. Cash has a long way to go. A lot of people aren't unimportant, but I think the best thing that I can say is not many people have gone down from recognisable to unimportant in the course of this save, whereas some people are actually making their way up. Psicosis, he did lose to Jerry, so they've swapped positions, but that was a sacrifice that I was willing to make. And that is the state of our roster in November 2001, and I'd have to say it is getting a little bit bloated, especially if we make the moves that I'm expecting to make in the next couple of days. So what do? Do we release people and see how we're standing? Do we set up a development so we can still use those people when we want to, but we're not having people who are ice cold on our roster? I'm talking about Lash LaRue. I'm talking about probably people like Mike Sanders, who once they've finished their current storyline do need to go away for a little bit and perhaps get repackaged or whatever. Of course, we've got Saturday night for that, and if I'd not just started Saturday night, I am going to be honest, I probably would have just turned Nitro into a 2-hour show, had like the 45-50 people maybe on that, and then sent people down to development, but I didn't do that. So I think still just yet I'm not going to do the development. I'm going to take a little bit more feedback from that. Hopefully we do need to make these signings. I know I could make them on the last minute just before they're about to come into the company, but I think it makes more sense. It's a little bit more realistic that now Ric Flair is available to sign. I thought David Flair was saying, don't bring him in then for a second. Loads of people want to see us bring Ric Flair in, and I could try and be a little bit stingy, save money by bringing him in on a per show deal, trying to tie it to realism here. While we're losing money, we do still want somebody like Ric Flair on our roster, and I think a 2-year deal is fair for him. He doesn't want to work B shows or house shows, I don't think. I wish there was a way that he could work house shows but not B shows, but I think what we'll do instead is I'll put it up to $120,000 per month. So it's about the reduced schedule, so I'm hoping he's not a dick about this now and says that, well, we offered him more before, because that was in a very different light. He doesn't want to work house shows. He doesn't want to work B shows either, so I'm just going to have to deal with it, aren't I? Make offer to Ric Flair, a huge signing if we aren't stopped in our tracks by another promotion. Well, that's interesting. I was not aware of that. I'm assuming he broke his ankle in real life. Is there a way to see how long he's going to be out for? The 20th. Okay, that's fine. It's not something that we have to worry about. But I am going to wait to sign Scott Steiner, actually. We'll keep him on the shortlist. And the other thing I'm going to do, I will sign Rey Mysterio Jr. as well. I don't like him without the mask, but it's WCW in it, so that's another difficult one. But thankfully he wants about 10 times less than Ric Flair does. I'm going to try and get him without covering his travel. And Rey Mysterio, an absolute joy to work with there. Do I go up to a 4-year deal, actually? I might see if I can get him on a 4-year contract. Rey Mysterio, exclusive written deal for 4 years. For some reason, I remember reading Vince McMahon wasn't interested in Rey Mysterio at this time. Perhaps it was to do with the fact that he didn't have his mask, and obviously they had to do the process with the Lucha Council or whatever it was to get that done. But with all that sorted, there are now only a handful of people who are still out of contention because of those legal issues and having WCW contracts. You can see it's going to be another year almost until we can get Goldberg. If we can get Goldberg, that is, I think at his current popularity level, he would not be willing to negotiate with us. But there's also Ken Shamrock. Where does he fit? I'm not going to make the offer for him now because he's not going to debut on next week's episode, and I don't just want to bring him in for the sake of it. But I think the idea of signing Ric Flair, maybe Rey Mysterio, just having them backstage and not used is completely fine. The morale issues seem to be growing by the week, but we'll go through this week, hopefully get the contract signed for Ric Flair and Rey Mysterio, I should say. I've got in the back of my mind that if WWF go in for Scott Steiner, we could be screwed here. So is it better to just try and sign him right now? I think I'm just going to take the risk, to be fair. Nobody's going to sign an injured Scott Steiner, I don't think. And I should get the notice if anybody does make an offer. So we should be able to counter and hopefully be the company who gets him in. Again, there's a few people lower down on the card who I'm wondering about bringing in as well, but I just think we've got a lot going on at the minute and not that much space to slot new people in. Show costs have gone up massively there. So is that because we've now got the house shows, because we're not making that much money from the house show? Oh, I don't know what's going on. I'm not interested in the financials, to be fair. I think we're probably losing money from doing them house shows, but I'm just going to leave it as it is because I can't be bothered thinking about it, unfortunately. Wow. Chyna wins the Intercontinental Championship from Triple H. She certainly made the right decision to stay in the WWF. I think I was planning to have a feud with Buff Bagwell back at the time when I wasn't quite so high on Buff, to be fair. And yeah, she's now beating Triple H for championships. So whatever's happened there, maybe Shane being out of the picture means that everybody's decided to be nicer to one another. Something tells me in 2001 Triple H wouldn't have been putting over Chyna. But what he might have been doing is trying to get his father-in-law to pull his finger out and make an offer to Ric Flair, because I'm expecting any day now we will be getting the contract negotiations for him. RVD, the best worker in the world apparently. Don't know if you heard the sirens in the background there, but once again a teaser for the injured Scott Steiner. And there we go, 2 huge signings brought through the door. And then Ric Flair. Here's another thing. Ric Flair is loved. He's a WCW legend, but he's a heel, isn't he? I mean, I know we can book him as a face and set him as a face, but Ric Flair's a heel, right? So again, he might debut on this week's episode, to be fair. I've literally not planned this week's episode of WCW Nitro yet, I'm going to say that. I obviously know where things are going in the grand scheme, but we're going to just advance through now, and it might be the case that I decide before anybody gives feedback. But Ric Flair, 2001 November, is it a triumphant return for a WCW legend, or is he perhaps an agitator who from the outside does not like what he's seen become of Shane McMahon's WCW, particularly the treatment of his son, who has been my number one jobber, to be fair, and there's been reasonable competition for that spot, do not get me wrong. Triple H was the star of the show, defeating Spike Dudley, getting an 86 out of Spike Dudley. Someone tell me how we're supposed to compete with this company. 3 matches that are absolutely miles ahead of anything that we have put out. I mean, our best matches with RVD, I think, are only high 70s, aren't they? We might have 1 or 2 in the 80s. That's our 2 best wrestlers, and, well, actually, I think we might, at Uncensored, have a match that's going to knock that off the top spot. Malice is back. Do I give him a chance? He was in rehab when his contract expired, so maybe he's cleaned up his act. Do we give Malice a chance? Not really the question to be asking when we've just brought in 2 of the most exciting free agents on the market. So what we'll do instead is go through to this week's episode of WCW Nitro. Now what I am going to do is... No, I won't give it. I was going to give the night off to Ric Flair and Rey Mysterio, but actually, I might end up using Ric Flair or Rey Mysterio. This is probably the worst way to surprise debut somebody, isn't it? I could have just not shown you on screen I was negotiating with him, done a thumbnail where it was like, huge star, former multiple time champion coming back. But instead, I've kind of said on the last episode I'm bringing him in, and then now I'm like, he might be on tonight's show. That's apparently the big hook, whether or not I decide to bloody plan a show out before I just put something in the game. Absolute shambles. But we will go to, I think, a region that we've not been to for a while. Sod it, let's go to the Cricket Arena in Charlotte, North Carolina. Yeah, I think I'm going to do this. I think it's going to happen tonight, to be honest. Charlotte, North Carolina. Who could possibly turn up on this show? We've got some creative energy stored, and we've got some stored creative ideas. The creative finish may well be used, because I don't know what the main event's going to be tonight. Storyline idea, we do need to stick on it, but I think it's DDP only. I don't think he's been in a storyline with 30 days left. We will get some creative energy spent. I always like to have a finish as much as we can. Sean O'Haire's going to hopefully get a pop for his next victory, and we have another good angle here, an angle idea. So I think I'll go with a character idea, because I've got a couple of people. That's absolutely not happening, not in a million years. And then we'll go with let's do a storyline idea just to use our full points, and that is used on absolutely anybody, a near certainty. So happy to see that. Let's see what backstage segments we've got. That actually calms me down a little bit. I always expect it to start with a fight, so I'm hoping that this means that nothing too serious has happened. Jerry Lawler giving some tips to Johnny the Bull. Bob Sapp, you should not be starting fights with Paisley. Had to be separated. I worry about what Bob Sapp was going to do. There's 2 matches pre-booked for this show. Both feel like they could be main events, but both feel like they probably won't be, because I feel there's a slight risk involved with either of them. But that's what we're working with tonight. I do like to show you the absolutely ever-growing roster that we have and the increasing number of recognisable and well-known people. We're trying to balance out just how many unimportant people there are involved in the company, but that's okay. We've got a very, very strong roster, getting better by the week, and hopefully this Nitro will come together well. I've got plenty of ideas flying around in my head, so I do think this will be a good one, full of a few surprises, a couple of debuts minimum, and this episode of Nitro from the Cricket Arena in Charlotte, North Carolina begins with a song very, very familiar to WCW fans, with no build, with no tease, with no hype. The return of Ric Flair opens this post-Halloween Havoc episode of WCW Nitro. Of course, the commentators selling the shock just as much as hopefully the fans in attendance, and we give Ric Flair up to 12 minutes here just to take in the crowd reaction, say his piece. Of course, this man is unscripted, the first time that he has been seen anywhere in professional wrestling since March the 26th, 2001. Suited and booted, a delighted Ric Flair says that it is great to be back in WCW. He thought all of this was over 6 months ago when he shared this ring for what he thought to be the last time with the Icon Sting, but he says he could not be happier to have been proved wrong in the last few months. Ric Flair says that as long as he is breathing and this company is running shows, WCW will always have a place in his heart. When Shane McMahon reached out and invited him to come to this show of all shows in Charlotte, North Carolina, he did not hesitate. He's looking forward to catching up with some old faces and some of the new faces in the back. And of course, he plays to the crowd as much as possible here. It's very much a rare babyface promo from Ric Flair, and he sort of finishes his promo by saying, who knows, he might be out here again later tonight if the cards align. Now, one thing we sort of put across during the course of the promo, I want him to put across during the course of the promo, is that he's here as a guest, so it's almost teasing it or selling it as a one-night thing. We happen to be in Charlotte, North Carolina, and Ric Flair happens to be the invited guest of Shane McMahon here tonight, rather than this being that Ric Flair has signed with WCW. That is because of the way the storyline goes in the coming weeks and months. The commentators react to this surprising moment, clearly having had no idea that the Nature Boy was due to make his return last night, again selling it that everybody apart from Ric Flair and Shane McMahon have been completely caught off guard by, as the storyline is called, the return of Ric Flair, a storyline that I think is going to be really, really good in the build-up to Starrcade 2001 and into the year 2002. And I'd be interested to know what people sort of expect to see from Ric Flair. Do we expect what might be the more obvious angle of a power struggle between the old guard Ric Flair and Shane McMahon's new vision? Or is it perhaps that he is here as the legend of WCW to wave the flag for this company that he clearly very much loves? Whatever it is, that is a big portion of the show dedicated, because it's Ric Flair. You try and send him out for a 7-minute promo, you know it's going 12 minutes. That's just the nature of the beast. But absolutely huge, a big moment to kick off November. The road to Starrcade, which we are very much on right now, is kicking off in style, and I think the way the rest of this show goes, we're really going to have a jolt in the arm for the momentum of this. I almost felt at some points that too much was going on the episode, which, considering where we've been in previous weeks of quite simply not enough happening, the coming weeks will find the balance, but this I felt had to be a really stacked show to show what our intention is in the build-up to Starrcade. In the office of Shane McMahon, the WCW owner is seen smirking. Of course, he's pulled off a great little trick here, surprising everybody with the arrival of Ric Flair. And Arn Anderson enters the room. He shakes his head at Shane and says, you know, you kept that quiet, huh? He's smiling about it, laughing about it, and the two of them are clearly having a good time. This is a huge moment, and we want to put that over throughout the night. And Shane says that he had to do something special for the great people of Charlotte, North Carolina. And Arn Anderson says that basically this is as good as it gets. Shane says that may be the case, but he's sure that they're going to be just as happy to see our current World Heavyweight Champion Booker T in the main event tonight, especially when he's getting his hands on Kanyon. Storming into the office, the former Cruiserweight Champion Sugar Shane is fired up and demands to know the identity of the masked man who screwed him last week. He wants any information that Shane McMahon has, but Shane says that he doesn't have any idea. The arena security dealt with that man. He should be focusing on Juventud Guerrera and trying to get his title back. Juventud will be out in the ring with a microphone later tonight, and he encourages Sugar Shane to go out and try and get his answers from the new Cruiserweight Champion. We then get a segment where basically Jerry the King Lawler returns to commentary. He makes his entrance flanked by Hugh Morrus, Prince Brian Lawler and Sir Nelson Knight. They stand guard for the returning commentator, who of course has a no contact agreement between himself and the Extreme Outsiders following his victory over, well, Just Hack last week. But of course Dreamer was involved, and Jerry the King Lawler, as strange as it probably seems, does take his position back as the third man in the commentary booth before our opening match of the night, which is a decent match. Again, Billy Kidman not putting over the performance levels that we're after. Mike Awesome doing not that well, but he's not been booked as strongly as he should have been, to be fair. And he says an awesome bomb. You never try and power bomb at Billy Kidman, but it looked like it worked here tonight. The match designed to tell a specific story. Perhaps we could have gone to steal the show with this and it would have done better, but seeing how Billy Kidman didn't do so well last week, I decided the main event was more worthy of steal the show. During the match, we had Lance Storm. He distracted Billy Kidman more than attacked him, to be fair, but it was enough for Mike Awesome to get the decisive victory. Not that he should necessarily be struggling with Billy Kidman anyway. As soon as the arm of Mike Awesome is raised, Rob Van Dam runs down to the ring, going after Lance Storm with a steel chair, who he takes out on the outside. And something I've kind of forgot about or neglected with Rob Van Dam over the last few weeks is the coolness factor. So we want him to be doing those impressive, quick steel chair moves that he can do. So probably throws it at Lance Storm, takes him out with a kick, and then enters the ring, ducks an attack from Mike Awesome, and it's more of the same, putting his educated feet to work while using that steel chair. So I did want to focus on the details a little bit more tonight, and that is that Rob Van Dam can do things with a chair that a lot of people watching WCW won't have seen, so hopefully that gets a good reaction. Essentially, while Team Canada then regroup on the outside, Rob Van Dam throws the chair to the ground and takes a microphone. He says that Shane McMahon doesn't seem to want to make the match, but he's done hearing Lance Storm complain every week, and he knows everybody else is too. If what it takes is one more match with him, then uncensored, he wants Lance Storm. They're going to end this once and for all. Lance Storm is of course happy with this, but then teases returning to the ring to finish the job they started last week. There's two of them and only RVD. They back off, however, as Billy Kidman returns to the ring and picks up that steel chair. To their shock, and to the shock of everybody else, to be fair, Billy Kidman then drives the steel chair into the spine of the United States Champion, leaving him down in the ring. Billy Kidman picks RVD up after standing the chair up and drops him with a Kid Crusher onto the chair, Kidman then rolls out the ring, still sulking from his defeat, and heads up to the back. Medics then rush down to check on RVD, who is already in a bad way from last week. Of course, he managed to fight through the pain, but again, being hit to the head with that Kid Crusher onto the steel chair seems to have seriously hurt him, and a heinous act from Billy Kidman. And because I'm stupid, I forgot to put the note in that he turns heel, so I am probably going to have to go back to the booking screen and find a segment later where I can do the turn. I'm not even sure if there is one, but I will just double check. No, there isn't one actually. I'm just thinking there's definitely not one, so what a screw up. It gave me the option to turn him in that match. I didn't do it, and now when he actually turns, I forgot to do it. That's really annoying, but at least maybe Billy Kidman explaining himself next week is the moment where he officially turns heel, even though that's quite clearly a heel turn. Returning from the break, as the commentators switch gears to discussion of last week's title change, there is a disturbance in the crowd, and coming out with a clear look of intent on their face, Hack and Tommy Dreamer make their way out through the audience. Jerry the King Lawler's expression quickly changes as he reminds everybody they can't touch him, but there's clearly that panic in his voice that says, well, this is Hack and Dreamer, maybe they're just going to discard. I've put Paisley in the segment. Why is Paisley in the segment? Well, Paisley's also stood there, and it's probably why this hasn't got as good a rating as it should have. What an absolute farce this show is turning into. I've built it up, and then I'm already making my signature mistakes. Brilliant to see. Leaving Hugh Morrus to stand guard, Jerry Lawler sends Prince Brian and Sir Nelson to fight them off. Hack deals with Prince Brian fairly easily, throwing him into the guardrail, and then helps Tommy Dreamer in a 2-on-1 attack on Sir Nelson Knight. Stereo, Singapore Cane and steel chair shots take down the big man. As we saw in Sir Nelson Knight's first weeks, we almost had him impossible to take down. He has now become sort of more expendable as Hugh Morrus has joined the group, and in recent weeks we have seen Sir Nelson Knight lose that air of invincibility that he once had, and I just think he served his purpose when he did. There's still going to be moments where we can get the best out of Sir Nelson Knight, but he's not being pushed as the main threat within the King's Court anymore. Hack and Tommy Dreamer then approach Hugh Morrus, with Jerry the King Lawler stepping up and saying, they cannot touch me, you can't lay a hand on me, and coming out from the back. Upholding this agreement, security do ascend on the Extreme Outsiders and escort them from the arena. Of course, Shane McMahon sending them out because that was the agreement. The match only happened because Jerry Lawler had that no contact agreement written into this, so Hack and Tommy Dreamer cannot lay their hands on Jerry Lawler, and he's going to be able to keep spewing his nonsense and have his court do his bidding, so hopefully building some heat for the King's Court there. Ric Flair is then shown entering the office of Shane McMahon, and he shakes hands with Arn Anderson and then the man in charge. The two former horsemen share some banter, with Arn ribbing Rick for keeping this quiet from just about everybody. Rick says that it was all about that moment out there, and well, it couldn't have gone better in his opinion. Flair then earnestly thanks Shane McMahon for inviting him to be here tonight and for shaking things about tonight so he could watch his son compete live in the ring on Nitro. He can't wait to see him versus Mr. Perfect Curt Hennig. Shane is very reciprocal with the respect and says that they need to sit down and talk business sometime, because that moment out there is one of the best he's had since taking over WCW, and he's going to remember it for a long time. But tonight, he thinks Rick should just enjoy that moment. David is in action next, and Shane invites Rick to watch the match in here with them, or feel free to go out and watch it from ringside. Rick says that that sounds like an absolutely brilliant idea to him, and he heads out of the office as we return for the second match of the night. Ric Flair on commentary, and it looks like giving the match a boost, unless it's whoever else is on there, chatting away for the 4 minutes, but unfortunately his son is defeated decisively by Curt Hennig in 3 minutes and 58. It probably would have gone a little bit shorter than that if we didn't have Ric Flair on commentary, so David can thank his father for that. Curt Hennig stands tall in the ring, having soundly defeated David Flair, with Big Van Vader at ringside, another man who has a lot of history with Rick. They head up the ramp, and there is a stare down between Hennig and Vader and Ric Flair as the latter leaves commentary to check on his son. Hennig tells Rick, "This ain't your WCW anymore," and Rick comes back saying that he isn't a fan of what this triad group are doing. They better watch their mouths or they'll have him to deal with. The duo walk off, laughing off Ric Flair's words. They don't see him as an active threat anymore. Joining his down-trodden son in the ring, Rick lifts David up from the canvas and raises his arm. Things aren't going well for young David, but his father's still proud of him, so that's nice to see. And we're just kind of, again, setting up a few dynamics on the roster with Ric Flair. but the idea here is that he's not being framed as an active wrestler, more as a sort of nostalgia legacy figure. A video package that is terrible looks at the rivalry between Steve Corino and Dustin Rhodes, which began after Corino was revealed to have been behind an attack on Dustin's father, Dusty Rhodes. Since then, things have escalated, with Steve Corino putting Dustin on the sidelines with a brutal parking lot attack, which took him out of action. Following another confrontation at Halloween Havoc, the two will go one-on-one later tonight. Out of the package, Dustin Rhodes is shown in his locker room preparing alone. His father's not here because, again, he's at TCW. Meanwhile, Steve Corino prepares with Bob Sapp and Dawn Marie at his side. At this point, I'm thinking of buying out TCW just so I can change the taping schedule and so that we can actually have Dusty Rhodes to use when we want. Again, losing heat to the storyline, but I think this match is going to be a hell of a lot better than any of the segments that we've seen in the build-up to this one. We then get the an interview for Booker T before the next in-ring segment, actually, and he faces Kanyon later tonight, with the World Heavyweight Champion speaking about his victory over Triad member Curt Hennig last week, where he retained his championship. He's short of a victory tonight on one condition: that those suckers from the Triad stay away from ringside. In fact, if Big Van Vader, Curt Hennig and Jet keep their distance tonight, and Kanyon manages to beat him somehow, Booker T guarantees a World Heavyweight Championship shot to the guy who curated this group. He challenges Kanyon to prove that he's got the guts to fight him alone. As Booker T continues to be questioned on this, Ric Flair walks into the shot and is complimentary to Booker T about his reign as world champion, so very much positioning Rick as a face tonight in his various interactions, but of course he's in front of his home crowd, so that is what you'd expect. He compliments Booker on his reign as World Heavyweight Champion, calling one of the best title holders to ever hold this belt in WCW history, and he'll be watching tonight. Who knows if the Triad try and do a number on Booker T, Rick might have to come out and show them that he's got a hell of a lot left in the tank. Booker T takes very kindly to the compliments from the Nature Boy Ric Flair, one of the greatest champions in WCW, and thanks Rick for the support. A really good segment there, everybody doing well off script, gaining heat to one storyline and advancing Ric Flair's, so very, very happy with that segment. As the Cruiserweight Champion Juventud Guerrera makes his first entrance as the champion, he is joined by his Lucha Real pal Psicosis, who hypes up the champion on his way to the ring. Just moments after Juventud Guerrera begins to speak, a pissed off Sugar Shane marches down to confront him. Once he enters the ring, Sugar Shane is told to back off by Guerrera, who says that nobody should interrupt loyalty, especially royalty that has their gold. Sugar Shane is fired up but outnumbered, so keeps his cool and asks to know who it was who conspired with him last week when everybody was barred from ringside. Juventud says it was pretty clear to him who decided to try and get themselves noticed, and it's not somebody who has anything to do with Juventud Guerrera. Maybe Shane should speak to the boss and see if he can get into contact with that former Cruiserweight Champion who seemingly has a personal issue with Sugar Shane. Now I've realised that the mystery is not really a mystery here, because the masked man you can see is Chavo Guerrero, and that's something that's going to be revealed in future weeks. But I've never been shy of giving out spoilers during this save so far, so there you go. Coming out from the back, a masked man appears in the same mask as last week, but he is wearing a suit. Juventud laughs and pretends to be shocked as he says, "There he is, go get him." Sugar Shane is pissed off, but does leave the ring to go and chase the masked man. Juventud then turns his attention to Super Crazy and Yoshihiro Tajiri, who will battle in a number one contendership match at WCW Worldwide Saturday night this week. He doesn't care which one of them becomes number one contender, because he is going to beat whichever one of them that faces him. So a few things converging there, but the Cruiserweight Championship stuff all in basically one segment. There's a few segments actually, I think I've got 4 segments in total, but no Cruiserweight match on tonight's show. But a really great one scheduled for Saturday night that should hopefully get more eyes on Worldwide. Ric Flair is shown entering the office of Shane McMahon. That's either as we go into a break or come back from a break, I can't remember. But we then go into a decent wild brawl. I'm quite happy with a 62, and Steve Corino actually performing better than Dustin Rhodes does surprise me. He defeats Steve Corino in 10 minutes and 1 when Bob Sapp's getting involved and Dawn Marie's trying to get involved. This all distracts the referee, so Dawn's distracting the ref. Bob's trying to get involved, but Diamond Dallas Page comes and pulls the leg of Bob Sapp, causing him to hit his head on the apron. He can then roll into the ring and hit Steve Corino with a diamond cutter as he's ready to cheat in some way, and Dustin Rhodes then hits the lifting reverse DDT to pick up the win. So a huge assist from Diamond Dallas Page, who is gone just as quickly as he arrives, but Dustin Rhodes stands tall in the ring, defeating the man who claimed he wasn't worthy of challenging for the NWA World Heavyweight Championship just last week. The commentator suggests that Steve Corino will not take his first defeat in a WCW ring well, but he may well have to put his championship on the line if he wants a chance at revenge at the natural Dustin Rhodes. Dustin Rhodes, we see, is selling his elbow following the win, but otherwise looks in high spirits, and that's not the start of an injury angle. It's just literally that I've got a segment later where realistically, in my mind, Dustin Rhodes would have come out and saved somebody, and the reason that, well, basically I'm just trying to give a little justification. He's going getting his elbow checked out as that goes down, and that's the reason he doesn't come out for the save. Otherwise it would kind of undermine the segment. In the back, Sugar Shane approaches Super Crazy and Tajiri, asking if either of them have seen the Masked Man anywhere, or Lucha Royale for that matter. Neither one of them have seen anything, so Sugar Shane turns to AJ Styles, who says he's also seen absolutely nothing, but he's going to come with Sugar Shane to help find them. Otherwise it's just going to be a repeat. He's going to get outnumbered and jumped, and it's not going to be good for anybody. Making their way out to the ring, the Natural Born Thrillers confidently raise their World Tag Team Championships high in the air before speaking to put over their monumental victory over the Road Warriors last week. The commentators working overdrive to try and put across how big that win was, and we're trying to say that Chuck Palumbo and Sean O'Haire are made men after defeating the greatest tag team in wrestling history. The two men do show respect to the legends that they beat and put them over as the toughest tag team that they have ever had to face. But for Chuck Palumbo and Sean O'Haire, this just keeps rolling on. That wasn't a time to pat themselves on the back and say that they've done all they need to do. They proved themselves once again to be the best tag team in the world, and they want to know what, or specifically who, is next for them. Coming out from the back in a timely manner, to the shock of the commentators, Christian makes his way out to the ring, or down the ramp we should say, saying that he has heard enough. If you're looking for a great tag team wrestler, then you don't need to look in the ring. You need to look at Christian Cage. Cage tells O'Haire and Palumbo to have a real good look at what true greatness looks like, and he's just doing his usual cocky, arrogant self. Christian Cage, even in 2001, I think, was absolutely brilliant at playing a smarmy, prickish character. The two men invite Christian into the ring, Sean O'Haire doing that thing where they sit on the middle rope and raise the top rope to make things a little bit easier for him. You're more than welcome to come and prove that with us. As he does this, however, another man who has also very recently been in the WWF, the man we know as Test, enters the ring behind them. When Chuck senses this, hears the noise, he turns round and straight into a decapitating big boot from one of the few men in professional wrestling who can match up physically to Sean O'Haire and Chuck Palumbo. Sean O'Haire then turns and begins brawling with the other big man in the ring, of course referred to as Test here, but will later be introduced as Andrew Martin, only to be jumped by Christian Cage. The two men lay out the World Tag Team Champions, standing tall, having made a huge impact upon their jump to WCW. And I think, again, this is just part of us putting a load of big stuff onto this one show, and I'm hoping that it's come across well and not like too much going on in one night, if you know what I mean. At the same time, I think if we've got the return of Ric Flair, people turning over to check out what Ric Flair's doing in WCW, and then you see moments like Andrew Martin and Christian Cage making their debut, then I think that's going to be just a good thing for the overall momentum of the company in establishing these two as a team from the get-go. Prior to the main event, Scott Hudson is shown in the back, and you can see there why I was so keen to get both Christian Cage and Test. I would have signed Christian either way, but Test was kind of dependent on us getting Christian Cage, because I think the two Canadians there make for a very good duo. Prior to the main event, Scott Hudson is shown in the back outside the office of Shane McMahon, and he reports that there has been some discussions going on within the last half hour. Of course, earlier we heard Shane say just enjoy the night to Ric Flair essentially, but clearly Ric Flair had other things in his mind, and some heated discussions have been taking place within the last half hour between the man in charge and Ric Flair, coming out of the office looking angry and mouthing "you son of a bitch," Ric Flair is then surprised to see the cameras and tries to sort of play off his demeanour, laughs it off. He's all smiles when he sees that the cameras are on him, but of course that brief moment when he came out of the office probably tells us what we need to know. Scott asks Ric Flair for an update, and he takes a deep breath and composes himself. Rick laughs and says that sometimes when doing big business, things don't always go the way you plan them the first time. Maybe tonight, the emotion of this evening wasn't the time for him to sit down with Shane McMahon, but right now he's got to go and speak with his son, and then he's going to be joining everybody else in watching this amazing main event. He hypes up Booker T versus Kanyon when Scott pushes for any details from the meeting between Shane McMahon and Ric Flair. Ric Flair says he knows what these journalists are like, but there's going to be no scoop tonight for Scott Hudson. He smiles and walks off, trying to smooth things over and play things down. In the back, AJ Styles and Sugar Shane seem to have exhausted all other options and are looking for the vehicle of Lucha Royale in the parking lot. While they do eventually find it, they are just a little bit too late, as Juventud and Psicosis are shown to be sat in the car with that masked man in the driving seat, seemingly disproving Juventud's claim that he has nothing to do with those two guys. When they approach the car drives off, Juventud hanging out the window, raising the Cruiserweight Championship above his head. And that's a 39 rated segment, so it shows that probably it would best to stick the storyline advancements into the matches with the Cruiserweight division storyline rather than having them do in-ring segments, which is basically a mistake I'd made tonight, but I only had 4 matches due to everything else that was going on, and the regular Cruiserweight match was missing. I did at one point think I was going to put Super Crazy and Yoshihiro Tajiri on this match card, but I just decided I'd rather give it the time that it deserves on Worldwide, even if fewer people will see it. We then get the main event where, true to the word and with the possibility of getting a World Heavyweight Championship shot in his future, Kanyon does manage to just wrestle this match on his own. It's pretty much the first time since WCW came back that he's attempted to do this, and we see in 8 minutes and 22 he is defeated by Booker T. It seems like a short main event, but I think when the matches in general are probably 10 to 12 minutes, when it's a proper main event, I felt like we still needed to show that Booker T with an 82 performance is levels above Kanyon with a 55. We are building towards a much bigger main event match at Starrcade 2001, and I think if we're having Booker T really struggle against Kanyon, then it kind of undersells the story that I'm trying to tell with him, which is that Booker T is just on an island on his own at the minute in this company, and we'll see that story develop over the next couple of months. But that doesn't mean that Kanyon doesn't get any offense in and doesn't do well. He's a very accomplished wrestler and a very credible threat, but Booker T is just clearly, as he was with Kurt Hennig last week, even after that attack that left him less than 100%, he's just clearly the top guy in the company. While they were certainly true to their word during the match, Booker T is quickly set upon by Big Van Vader, Kurt Hennig and Jet, who had stayed into the back until it was clear that Kanyon wasn't getting up, but it was basically as Booker T was pinning Kanyon that they came out. Well, it's too late to change the result. The 3 men lay into Booker T and take him out in the ring. He tries to fight back, but let's be honest, nobody can fight a 3-on-1 attack. Eventually back up, no support comes from Booker T. Kanyon then joins in the attack and orchestrates the others to also get involved. The commentators appear to be expecting Ric Flair to make the save. I'm not sure we necessarily do it quite so on the nose, but of course it's Charlotte, North Carolina. All of Booker T's other allies, Rob Van Dam, Dustin Rhodes, Chuck Palumbo, Sean O'Hare, even Sugar Shane to an extent, are basically dealing with something else or are physically hurt. You could argue Diamond Dallas Page as well, but nobody comes out to help Booker T, and we're sort of expecting Ric Flair essentially. I don't know how we try and create that idea, but that's what I want, because we then cut back to the cameras that are still in the parking lot from that segment just a couple of minutes ago, and we see Ric Flair walking towards his limousine and getting into it. So those words he gave at Booker T a little while ago proving to be somewhat hollow, as Ric Flair is driven away from the building in luxury as the Triad stand tall to end WCW Nitro, and Booker T is down and out. I didn't want to get people to try and boo Ric Flair while he was in his hometown and his return and his homecoming and all these positive emotions that should be there on the night, but I thought we'd do the segment with him coming out of Shane's office and the mask slipping a little bit, and then at the end of the night when he could have been the returning conquering hero, and what a pop that would have been, we take that away, pull the rug from underneath Ric Flair's return, in a sense you could argue, but I think it does a very good job of setting up what is to come next. An 82 overall rating, increasing our popularity in 10 regions, and I'm really happy with that show overall. I've just thought with the Billy Kidman turn that I screwed up, I'm going to put a segment on Worldwide Saturday night, probably just a recap of it, but I'll put the turn of Billy Kidman in there so that on next week's show he is heel as he should be, because it's really going to bug me looking at Billy Kidman still as a face after what is quite clearly a heel turn on one of our most beloved faces in the company. Sean O'Haire and Rob Van Dam had a blazing argument outside the venue. Don't know what they were blazing, but clearly it's not having the mellowing effect that one might expect from a relaxed personality such as Rob Van Dam. But I suppose Sean O'Haire, the intensity coming out in him. Ric Flair and Don Callis. That's interesting. Ric Flair having some degree of influence over the behaviour of Don Callis. I'm not sure that's necessarily a good thing, knowing what Ric Flair got up to throughout his career, but I'm now going to book WCW Worldwide, which features that aforementioned match between Yoshihiro Tajiri and Super Crazy, and Buff Bagwell triumphantly returning to the main event for the first time since he quit WCW. Again, that guy who's not under contract being used every single show. Quite a lot of people you can see there not used on WCW Nitro, and those are the people you can expect to see on this episode of Worldwide. So as you can see on screen, everybody apart from the Road Warriors whose contracts expire within the next few days, and the yet to debut Jerry Lynn and Rey Mysterio Jr. are used on tonight's show. I do have a couple of concerns about something on the card actually, and I've got two matches with people who are just unimportant in it. Now Elite Skipper has warm momentum, and I think that might be enough to negate the fact that all four people in the match are considered unimportant. So yeah, that's something we're just going to have to see how it plays out, but I am going to begin WCW Saturday Night Worldwide right now with a really great match. And unfortunately, Super Crazy, it seems off his game, so it would have been better than a 53, but I think that is considerably better itself than the match we had with them previously. I've, of course, as people suggested, changed them from having negative chemistry, and I've just changed it to neutral. I thought putting it as great when they've rolled the dice in the game as negative doesn't really sit right with me, even though in reality we know that these two certainly did have great chemistry. I think a big part of them having such great matches was just their in-ring ability and how popular they were with the crowd at the time. So I think it's fair enough that with them being not that over, it's just a 53, but in future I do expect to see another match between these two getting a much better rating. Decent wrestling we know is certainly understating it, but not having much heat is probably fair, as Super Crazy defeats Yoshihiro Tajiri in 9 minutes and 31 with a moonsault. We sent them out to steal the show, so it's probably fair to say they've not quite done that, but again, it's face-face, so in future if we have one of them as a heel, then it could be a better match. When we change Super Crazy's gimmick in the future, if we have them in a storyline that's got better heat, all these factors could mean that we're going to be having great matches between them in the future, but for now, it's just sitting fairly middle of the road. Super Crazy stands tall, having become the #1 contender to the World Cruiserweight Championship. Tajiri eventually returns to his feet, a sign of mutual respect between the two, as there was the last time they faced off when Tajiri was the victor. The commentators do note that in singles competition in WCW, these two men are now tied at 1 apiece, while as a tag team, they have 6 straight televised victories, and many more when you include non-televised matches. So we are letting people know there that house shows and pre-show matches do mean that these two are on a pretty crazy hot streak as a team, coming down from the back as the two men shake hands. The man introduced as the Big Man, or whatever we called him last week, now we understand he goes by the name just Guido. He walks down, he's ready to deal with some business of his own, but there is a somewhat knowing glance towards Super Crazy and Tajiri as they clear off, and it is time for him to address the Mamalukes. Now, it's not a very good segment as I expected. This is very much a low-level storyline, isn't it, that we're building up, and hopefully Guido can transcend the other guys in this storyline, as I think he is a much better performer than any of them. He stands ground in the middle of the ring and calls out those Mamalukes, saying that he gave them weeks and weeks to get on the same page before his arrival, but they couldn't do it, and that's why he is now doing this publicly. Johnny the Bull, Reno and Vito come down to the ring and get a dressing down by Guido. He speaks to each of them individually and gets in their faces, telling them that the time for being petty little children is over. They work for him, and what he says goes. If they can't work together, then they won't be working at all. The three men clearly have a reverence and respect for the words that Guido is saying. Again, the unspoken history that they clearly have, which we will go into further as the weeks and months go on, and they all nod along in agreement. They don't necessarily get along with each other all the time, but when Guido is speaking, they know that they need to listen. Coming out from the back, Mike Sanders leads Matt Jindrak and Shawn Stasiak to the top of the ramp. Stasiak encouraging Sanders to go to the ring with him, but after what he experienced last week, getting put in that Fujiwara armbar, he tells them he's happy to just stay here. He looks to the two men who seem to have put him up to this. We see that Sanders is a little bit hesitant, but he challenges Guido to face him one-on-one next week, and Guido doesn't hesitate in accepting the challenge, and we can see a sort of look from Matt Jindrak that's kind of saying, without saying, Sanders needs to prove himself after he got humiliated last week by Guido. Now this is going to be another unimportant versus unimportant match, but as you'll see throughout the course of this night, it's something that I'm just going to deal with on Worldwide and hope that it doesn't have too negative of effect in the long term for anybody. Buff Bagwell is interviewed about his main event match. He is triumphantly putting over his return from the bottom of the card, and he is on his way to the top. That's reminded me, I do actually want to set something in the game, and I'm going to show you what I'm going to do actually here. I'm going to go back to the booking screen once I've spoke about this, because this was supposed to be the beginning of it really. He's going to go one-on-one with Crowbar tonight, and there was a time when he tried and downplay and belittle and mock him, but tonight Buff has just one thing on his mind: victory. We see that this Buff Bagwell isn't here to mess around and be the usual clown that he's always been. He now has a very, very specific goal, and we see how that has changed the mindset of Buff the Stuff. But going back to the booking screen here, I have actually already done it. He is preparing to turn. Whether this is a tease that we then don't pull the trigger on, or whether Buff Bagwell will be a face, I'm still not 100% decided, but the general feeling that I get from the comments and from just the way that the booking has been going, I do think that this is almost lining up to be an inevitable Buff Bagwell face turn. But we'll get back into Worldwide and we'll see how that tease of a face turn develops throughout this evening. Kiwi and Lash LaRue are then in the ring, and they cut a promo about what was said to them last week. The reason they were looking so down in the dumps when speaking with Jimmy Hart was the fact that they were told last week that they'd have to team together to keep their place on Worldwide, so bringing the backstage uncertainty about their futures onto camera essentially. The two men then begin bickering even during the course of this promo, showing there is no chance that they can really function as a team. Elix Skipper and Kid Romeo then come out and run down the duo, telling them that they won't have to worry about teaming together again because they're going to humiliate them so bad that they won't want to show their faces around here ever again, etc. And it is one of the worst matches I've ever seen in this game, and in this save particularly. I think I had a couple in my TNA save that were like, I don't want to say it was a 0 rating, but it might have even been a 1 rating, or certainly single digits, so we're not quite there yet. The wrestling and the crowd were okay, but it's just, well, a lack of chemistry between Lash LaRue and Kiwi, which I think, if their timing is all over the place, I quite like that for the storyline. It suits in a way. I say storyline, I might never team them again. It was just having somebody for Skipper and Romeo to beat, because we do need these lower level card guys to get wins over basically jobbers, so that it does mean something when we're putting them on screen. And Romeo and Skipper had some good showings against the Road Warriors and the Natural Born Thrillers, so I just wanted to give them another chance here tonight. Elix Skipper, quite clearly the pick of the bunch in a very, very poor match. They celebrate their win. Two very, very self-confident, in-shape guys, and they're just hopefully enjoying their victory because, well, they've not had many, have they? We basically go for a segment. Billy Kidman was approached for answers after his attack on Rob Van Dam. I was so lazy with this segment that I didn't even bother finishing the sentence when I booked it in the game, but it's literally just there because, like I said, it was going to bug me not to have Billy Kidman's heel turn in the game. So a complete success, no complaints there, because it also doesn't advance the storyline. We then go into the ring where Pete Gas and Rodney introduce Diamond and Swinger to the ring, saying that they have brokered a deal with the two newcomers and the four of them will be forming an alliance going forward. Their first challenge will be facing the Young Dragons next week on WCW Nitro, and again, it's a match between unimportant people, so it could well ending another disaster. Diamond and Swinger talk up Gas and Rodney, but very much only in terms of them buying their friendship. So they're not saying it outright, but it's clear that they're thanking them for the new clothes that they bought them or the drinks that they got them last week when they were having this discussion. It's clear that that's what Pete Gas and Rodney are doing, and that's basically what their gimmick is going to be going forward. They're buying favour because they've got money and not much else going for them. Swinger and Diamond are ready for the Young Dragons. The Young Dragons then come out from the back and are backed up, joined by 3 Count. And again, I'm supposed to be turning 3 Count face as well because we have a very, very heel-heavy roster in general. So I'm just going to again go back and check that I have put that in motion so I can do the turn sooner rather than later. That one I actually hadn't done, so good that I went back there, and we can continue the face turn of 3 Count on next week's Worldwide. Crowbar is interviewed about his main event match with Buff Bagwell. He says he's got a lot of stuff going on at the minute, and missing Nitro and watching what the Triad did to Booker T on Wednesday made him really, really mad, and he's going to take his aggression out in the ring tonight. He's sorry that it has to be Buff Bagwell who deals with that. Buff Bagwell, I'm certain that I put him off screen, so he's using subtle mannerisms to hint at a face turn from off screen. Maybe I did him as non-speaking role, God knows. But another really poor match, but it was only 2 minutes. Chris Daniels v Jamie Noble. Noble disqualified when Cash runs in and attacks Christopher Daniels after just 2 minutes, and he is laying into him. Noble actually confronts Cash because he's lost a match to Daniels because Cash got involved, but Cash tells Noble shut up, and Noble does actually join in. The 2 men laying their boots in until AJ Styles makes the save. Now, the 2 teams we've got here are Cash and Noble, who went on in the future in WWE to become the Pitbulls, and Daniels and AJ, who became best friends, and obviously we saw them work a lot together and against each other in TNA. Now, when I was putting this together, that only occurred to me after, and I'm probably sure it was in the back of my head, like, oh, Cash and Noble, that's got a ring to it. Daniels and AJ, that's got a ring to it. And then when I put it together, I realised that I was essentially building a tag team match that was between 2 teams who did actually form further down the line. So usually I don't like sort of taking stuff from 2005 or whatever and bringing it forward and acting like it's an idea that I've come up with. But I do feel like this segment came together organically, and I do really like Cash and Noble together as a team. I know they didn't do much in WWE, but I thought that those 2 really did work well together. And the Jimmy's New Faces storyline does advance with this segment and gains heat. Unlike some other storylines that we have, it'll probably be the angles that are a lot better than the matches in this one rather than the other way around, although even in 2001 these guys would have put on an absolutely incredible match. We get a decent promo or an interview segment with Jerry the King Lawler, interviewed by his fellow broadcast partner Mike Tenay, and Hugh Morrus is stood behind the seated King, just looking every bit as intimidating as he can. The 2 commentators reflect on the events of the King's recent absence from commentary, and Jerry says that his fight isn't over, and he's determined that the King's Court will wipe those extremely crappy wrestlers from the face of WCW. The King says that he beat Hack and he beat Dreamer, and he has nothing left to prove to either of them inside the ring. This man, his twisted jester, as Mike Tenay likes to call him, is more than up for the task of ending them permanently. Jerry issues an open challenge on Hugh's behalf to anybody from that dead company to come and face him at the Hammerstein Ballroom in a few weeks' time at Uncensored. And he also issues the challenge to Dreamer and to Hack. They've been ambushing and blindsiding Prince Brian Lawler and Sir Nelson Knight, and he knows that they are ready at Uncensored to finish Tommy Dreamer and Hack and make the Extreme Outsiders permanently. We then go into the main event. It's a decent match. It's not a decent match. Buff Bagwell defeats Crowbar in 8 minutes and 21 with a blockbuster, and I want a spot here where basically Crowbar sends Buff to the outside, and it looks like he's going to do a dive to the outside, but Jet comes out from the back, and he's obviously going to go and attack Crowbar and cost him the match as he's taking control. However, Buff on the outside gets up, runs round and clotheslines Jet, absolutely decapitating him, taking him out. Crowbar then does his dive but gets caught by Buff Bagwell and ran into the ring post. Buff then rolls Crowbar into the ring, gets to the top rope and hits the blockbuster. But again, the teaser a face turn for Buff Bagwell there is that he could have got the help from Jet. He could have been part of screwing over Crowbar, but instead he decided to take out the threat, and he won this match on his own merit and not because somebody helped him. Of course, we're not quite ready to turn him face, but Buff Bagwell celebrates in the ring, and he is so happy. And hopefully the goofy side of Buff Bagwell that people have talked about, he's an absolute clown, isn't he? But is there a likability factor if you position him and push him as a face? And no, for certain he was getting good reactions from certain crowds, so I do think there was the potential there for him to be this fun babyface. While it's only worldwide, Buff does put this over as a huge milestone. However, he is far from done in his mission as he says this, and Anderson comes out from the back with a microphone and congratulates Buff on the work that he's doing, and says that he's been watching Buff very, very closely these last few months, and he's been impressed with what he's seen. And upon him feeding that back to Shane McMahon, so has the WCW owner. Next week, Shane McMahon wants Buff Bagwell to come to WCW Nitro, where there will be a contract offer waiting for him, and Anderson offers a handshake to Buff Bagwell, who instead gives a big hug to the Enforcer, while Arn doesn't look all too comfortable with that. Buff's enthusiasm is hopefully somewhat infectious as he goes to the outside. He's celebrating with the fans. He is absolutely delighted and hopefully continuing to just test the waters. I don't know why that advanced the Ric Flair storyline. That's not something to hint like that Buff Bagwell's going to be involved in that or anything. It's just because Shane and Arn are both in that, obviously. Green notes, good segment, happy with that to end the show, and Worldwide getting a 51 is about what you'd expect. I'm sure we're making money as we do every week. It's just the monthly outgoings that do screw us over, but again, gaining popularity in our two main regions, so we are on our way back to where we started, and I think I said it at the very start of the save that it was just going to take time, or rather people in the comments said it, to be fair. I was starting to doubt myself more and more as the weeks went on, and people said essentially it just takes time to get up there with this save and the roster that you have, and here we are striking gold with WCW Nitro. I do believe the best episode that we've done so far. In fact, I think it's the first show that we've had over 80, is it? I know we had a really good episode on the back of a DDP promo the other week, but yeah, this is 4 points ahead of that, and it's the second best match we've done, so Kanyon really is quite present. So when you put him in the ring with one of our top guys, he is somebody who can bring the best out of them. But RVD, Booker T, even Mike Awesome, that's good to see, because I've not always been impressed when he's wrestling other mid-carders, but it shows again when these guys, or is it just that Lance and Rob and Booker are that good? Certainly Rob Van Dam is absolutely incredible in like 5 of those top 10 matches. Really, really great to see, but also topping out our viewership rating there, 2.3 million tuning in, so word of mouth about this new WCW. For a long time I did think I wasn't doing a very good job, but there we go, showing growth and progress. DDP now fully recovered from his injury, Ric Flair building an alliance between his son and Lil Nate Charles Robinson. But that is the end of this week's episode, and I think, yeah, on one hand, I'm wondering if people might think that it was an overbooked episode of WCW Nitro. Almost too much happened, and I could have tried to spread this out over a few weeks. But Starrcade is fast approaching, just 52 days left. And speaking of Starrcade, I will have something in the next video pertaining to essentially the big ideas that I have for that show and asking some feedback on what people think. So until that one, thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.